Good afternoon. I am Marie Williams, Deputy Director at the Stoneleigh Foundation. On behalf of Stoneleigh and the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, I want to welcome you to Restorative Justice for Youth, a screening and discussion of Justice USA. Before we begin our program and conversation, I'd like to extend warm thank yous to our partners on this event, the Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project, the Youth Arts and Self-Empowerment Project, Juvenile Law Center, Common Justice, and Equal Justice USA. And of course, thank you to all of our panelists. In a couple of minutes, I'll turn you over to our facilitator for the event, Gani Songster, currently the Transformative Healing and Restorative Justice Manager at the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, and a longtime and beloved activist and advocate for young people, families, and communities right here in Philadelphia and around the country. But before that, a word about the Stoneleigh Foundation and why we believe it's important to participate in this event today. Stoneleigh is a Philadelphia-based foundation established in 2006 by John and Cara Haas to support, through fellowships, exceptional leaders seeking to change the systems that purport to serve young people, their families, and their communities. Some of Stoneleigh's former fellows include our current police commissioner in Philadelphia, Kevin Bethel, our current first assistant deputy district attorney and former administrator at the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, Robert Listenby, co-founder of the Juvenile Law Center, Bob Schwartz, and Danielle Sered, founder of one of our partners on this event, Common Justice. So as a foundation, we at Stoneleigh have always sought to support, harness, and amplify the power of transformational leaders and of their ideas. And as such, we maintain a spirit of curiosity and of humility especially when those we support and with whom we partner approach us with a big idea, sometimes about things about which we have very little knowledge. It is with that spirit that we decided to embark on a learning journey with Jody Kent-Levy and the leadership at the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth to learn about a bold new application of the tried and true principles of restorative justice. So right about now, you're going to be asked to complete the opening poll because we know that many of you are on the same learning journey that we are on. I'm going to give you a second. You should see that pop up. And at the end of our presentation, you'll be polled once again. So we'd be very appreciative if before you rush off to your next thing, you were to pause and complete that poll as well. Another little bit of housekeeping. We imagine you're going to have questions of the panelists. We're reserving that time for you to have them answered, so don't worry. But you don't have to wait until the very end of their presentation. As a question arises, you can submit it using the Q&A button. And when doing so, we ask only that you're sure to say who you are, if you can, and what your organizational affiliation is, if any. And finally, as you might imagine, 90 minutes is way too short a period of time to tackle a topic as weighty as this one. So we're going to be hosting a second event. And in that second event, we're going to be focused on Philadelphia, Stoneleigh's hometown. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gani.
Can't hear Connie.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Marie. And many thanks to the Stoneleigh Foundation for the co-hosting this event with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. CFSY's longtime advocacy for the humane treatment of children, and that even in the wake of harm, children be judged and treated as children, has naturally led us into more and deeper partnerships with those who are out there embroiled in the same fight, and with brave healing justice advocates and organizations actually modeling that kind of justice and approach to reducing harm and reducing young people in handcuffs and cages, for that matter, we're naturally drawn into transformative justice, healing justice, restorative justice communities ourselves. You know, after serving as the inaugural program manager of Philadelphia's first ever restorative justice diversion program for youth, that's Healing Futures, a program that's ran by the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project. The Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project, one of our partners here today. You know, I joined CFSY as the Transformative Healing and Restorative Justice Manager, where I get to lean into CFSY's commitment to amplify and bolster models that address root causes of violence and harm, center individual and community accountability and healing as vital ingredients to public health and public safety. We believe that our mantra, "No child is born bad," is proven every time a young person who've caused harm receives the support and the guidance that they need through restorative justice processes for exploring accountability, carrying out their obligations to repair whatever harm they have caused and put things more right as possible, and continue growing into contributing members of their community and in the human family that we believe they were meant to be. This short film you're about to see, followed by a conversation about it, further explores this. And so we invite you to give a look and a listen to episode 6, the final episode of the Justice USA series. Thoughts are swirling in my head, and feelings are swelling in my heart, as I'm sure is the case with everyone else here, including in our audience out there, about what we just saw. Let's dive right in. And I want to introduce formally our 3 esteemed panelists. Judge Calloway's 20-year tenure, right, from juvenile court magistrate to juvenile court judge, has earned her praise as deeply committed to justice and fairness, driven by her desire to continue serving her community in more impactful capacities, her integrity and dedication, her effectiveness and trustworthiness as a judicial leader who's committed to education and nurturing the next generation of legal minds, and has a unique approach to dispensing justice, right? And the adjectives go on and on and on and on. Judge Calloway resides and presides in Davidson County, Tennessee, and it's from there that you join us today. Welcome, Honorable Judge Sheila Calloway.
Thank you, Gani. That was a wonderful introduction.
Well, not good enough for what I actually know and read about you. And Travis, from serving as a police officer, a soldier in the U.S. Army, pastor, volunteer in marginalized communities, child advocate, victims advocate, restorative justice practitioner, and doctoral candidate, right? Just to name some of his expertise, came to this case, right? And comes to us today with a very uncommon perspective on accountability, about justice, and about healing. Travis Claybrooks, coming from Nashville, Tennessee, as executive director of Rafa Institute, who's doing phenomenal restorative justice diversion work out there. Welcome, my brother.
Man, Gani, it's so good to be here, and such an honor to be in space, not only with you, Judge Calloway, you, Marshall, but you, Kempis, man. Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you for being here, brother. And last but not least, many of us might be more familiar with the work of Marshall Goldberg than his name, because of, you know, some of the most the popular TV shows and movies, some of our might even be our favorites, was produced and written by him, right? But from being a Harvard honors graduate and valedictorian speaker at Stanley in his youth to serving as counsel of the U.S. for the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights, working for the Department of Justice on civil rights, where he fought respectively to expand voters' rights and defend civil rights, to actually writing and producing, like I said, some of the most memorable and iconic TV shows and movies of TV land, right? To being an award-winning writer and professor, to being the producer of what we just saw, the short film we just saw, and the entire Justice America series. Marshall Goldberg joins us from Los Angeles, California, where he lives with his wife. Welcome, Marshall, my brother. I think you're on mute, Marshall. I do it all the time.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Connie. I'm honored and humbled to be with this group. Really. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for, you know, what you do and all that you are. Let's get right into what we just saw. Why was it important to you, to each of you? This question is for each of you. Why was it important that this segment be made and shared? Let's start with you, Judge Calloway.
So thank you again for this opportunity to talk about Justice USA, to talk about restorative justice. You know, for me, it was so important to see the real pain and the real suffering and how people were able to sit together and maneuver and get through that. People think about, or naysayers, or people who don't believe in alternatives to incarceration and don't think that people can truly be held accountable unless they're incarcerated, never really get to see what that looks like. And so, you know, I'm so grateful for Marshall. I'm so grateful for Travis for making that possible, that people can actually see a young person who has committed such a tragic harm and how it affected him, how it affected his entire family, not to mention the family of the Cheathams and how much hurt was going on. And to be able to come together and see them talk through that hurt and talk how, you know, what the one thing I love when Dia said, my father was a good man and I want you to be a good man. It just brought me to tears. I've seen Justice USA at least 3 times. And every time I see it, it brings me to tears, even knowing that it's going to happen. I've been on a panel with Dia before, and every time I'm with her, it brings me to tears, because that is what true justice should look like. And so for the audience that gets to see Justice USA, they get to see in that example what justice really can look like. And that's why I'm glad we put that part in the documentary.
Thank you, Judge Calloway. Travis, why was it important to you?
Yeah, it was important to me because I think the challenge that we now face is really, you know, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but we really have a public relations challenge. We have a marketing problem. Our challenge is no longer that we don't know what solutions are out there and which ones can work. When we think about responding to harm, criminal behavior, violence, however you want to term it, name it, see it, conceptualize it. Our challenge is not that we don't know what to do. It's not that we don't have ideas. It's not that we don't have options, that we don't have alternatives. Our our challenge now is that we have and I'm blessed, lucky, whatever, to work in this every day. And so I get a chance to see it, and it's obvious to me what the solutions are. It's obvious to me, and it's in my blood. I smell it. I smell like it. I sweat it. All of it. It's in me. It's in my psyche. But I think for the average citizen, the average person, the average American, or we're in conversations with people from the Ukraine right now, the average world citizen doesn't see it every day. And so the imagination is not there. So what can we do differently? As a police officer, it did not take long. And I grew up in a privileged space. I grew up in a brick house with two parents and private school and healthcare and all the things. And when I became a police officer, I was dumped into the projects, a place I had never really been. But it did not take me long to realize, to see. I mean, as I said in the documentary, it didn't take me long to see that, whoa, what I'm doing is not addressing at all what is really going on right here. You have circumstances that have driven people into unbelievable modes of survival. And when people are in survival mode, they will do anything. And most of people's efforts to survive are criminalized in our country. Yet we have the persisting conditions that drive people into survival mode. And I can see that just arresting and prosecuting and incarcerating and surveilling people was not dealing with the core drivers, the issues that were driving people into these survival modes. And I was I was 26 years old then. I didn't know what the answers were, but I knew what wasn't the answer. I knew that this system that I was a part of as a law enforcement officer wasn't the answer. And I think that's the situation for many people. They get a sense that, yeah, just putting people in prison because they come back out and da 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 is probably not the answer, but they don't have an idea what it is. What is the answer? What are the answers? And so this story, this documentary, this episode, I think is so important because it suddenly gives people a picture of what can work. It answers, it fills in the gap that's in the mind from what I know doesn't work, but I'm not quite sure what does work. This is that missing piece that gives people a vision of what else can work. So that's why it's been so important to me, not just for this to be made, but for it to be shown. We need, again, I go back, we have a marketing problem. We need to curate more of this, and wherever, and this is the thing, look, Marshall just found us first. That's it. But this is happening all over the country in pockets and in places. And kudos to all the people out there who are even on this webinar that are doing this work. Please keep it up, be encouraged. So yeah, that's why it's been important to me.
Thank you, Travis.
Great.
Marshall?
Well, this clip was actually part of a 6-episode series where we wanted to put the audience in the shoes of indigent criminal defendants. But a lot of people have strong opinions about the criminal justice system, but very few people actually know what it's like. They're getting their information secondhand. So what I wanted to do was put the audience in the shoes of indigent defendants and follow them all the way through the system. And it took a lot of time, but we were not only were in the men's jail, we were in the women's jail. And thanks to Judge Calloway, we were in the juvenile court and learned so much about that. And in some ways, I've said this before, I was like a perfect audience because I was open, but I didn't know much about it. And I was learning along with the audience. So when we did this, we have no narrator, we have no experts, there's no agenda. The audience is seeing it for themselves. And you know, Travis is exactly right. There is a marketing problem, but I think it's what precedes the marketing is the information, the education that people needed to see what the system's like. And what we've done throughout the series is humanize people. That sure, there's some people, some in the audience who say, you know, these kids are worthless, just put them in a cage and forget about them. And then there are other people at the extreme who, a similar extreme, who say, you know, they've just had a really tough life and, you know, we can't incarcerate them, or we can't, take them off the streets. Well, those are simplistic solutions, simplistic responses. And so for me, I came to see that before you get to policy, you have to open people's minds. That was the most important thing. And so how do we do that? And just people can identify with the victims, the defendants, the people who cause harm, if you humanize. And that's what we really set out to do. And when I also knew very little in this sense, again, I was a perfect audience because I knew very little about restorative justice. And it took a while to understand it. And I think we learned a lot from the Cheathams and from Amir that, okay, harm takes place and there's injury, but the response doesn't have to be incarceration. There can be other things. And so for me, why it was really important was to educate people like me who were curious and wanted things to be better. It's clear the current incarceration system isn't working, but were there alternatives? And finally, we go through these 6 episodes, and episode 6 is really about alternatives. It's not just a bleak presentation of the criminal justice system. And this was so instructive. And I think one of the things that gets through is it's so emotional that how Mrs. Cheatham in particular is a woman of grace, and it challenges the audience. Could I get to that level of humanity and compassion? And I think that's why it was so important that we can't dismiss other people like this. We just can't. We have to be like Mrs. Cheatham and try to get to that level of understanding.
Johnny, is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, and I did have some follow-up
Oh,
questions
go ahead.
for both Judge Calloway and you. But if it's something that's bursting to come out of you, it's for a reason. Let us have.
We'll weave it in. We'll weave it in.
Good.
Well, let me just say, Marshall, thank you for also, just showing us what we could do with the power of film. You know what I mean? That we can address things like violence, you know what I mean? And the carceral project and all of those things. So thank you for becoming an ally in this struggle. And we hope that you continue to use your craft and your expertise and your skill set to help advance these different models of addressing harm and violence. And the question that I wanted to follow up with for you, though, Judge Calloway, really came out of something that Travis said when Travis, you talked about how it works, showing how it works. A lot of people also, they want to ask that question, well, how does this work? How can we prove that it works? Some people might want some statistics, some data, you know what I mean? Do you have any data about how restorative justice diversion works vis-a-vis, a carceral approach or going through the courts?
Yeah, definitely. And for me, it is about the data. Being a juvenile court judge, it's kind of like what Travis was saying. We have, an a issue with what the community actually believes that we're doing, what we're getting done. You know, I hear all the time when a child makes the news and gets arrested for some offense, that people complain that the juvenile court is just going to give them cookies and milk and send them home, and they're going to come right back. And that is far from the truth of what really happens. When we have extremely good data that we keep on youth that are diverted from our system, particularly youth that go into our restorative justice program with Rafa Institute. We also have the same data of youth that end up going into what we call our Department of Children's Services custody, being locked up in a juvenile facility. And it is clear that the youth who are diverted do far better in our community than the youth that are ended up locking up. And it's the brain science supports that. When you think about children in the development and the brain science, you know, our brains don't fully develop until we're about 25. I will dare say for men, it's a little older. For women, it's probably a little younger, and y'all bring us to the middle of 25. We try to keep y'all with us. We try to keep y'all with us. Come on, man, let's get together. But if we know that, we know that our youth can grow out of these behaviors that they have. And if you put them in positive programs and you give them the support, you give them the love, you give them things that they need to learn how to grow out of these behaviors, their brains will develop correctly and they will learn they will grow out of all of these behaviors. On the other hand, on the flip hand, what the brain science shows us is that we start to incarcerate youth. We're incarcerating them. We're not giving them the opportunity to reflect on what they really did, because we're sitting them in a cage where we're not engaging with them and talking to them, talking through them, how their behavior may have hurt someone and who it may have hurt. They're not getting to see the person that they may have hurt. They're not getting to engage to that person. All they're seeing is their next door cellmate, or their cellmate, and who's in the same predicament that they're in, and they're generating bitterness and anger and the negative effects that affect their brain in a negative way. And so when they get out, they don't know better. And so they don't do better. And so I think Travis probably has more recent stats on Rafa in particular, but I know when we look at our youth that we diverted from the system in whole, and we do a diversion rate for about 2 years to determine whether or not they've come back in the next 2 years. If I look at the rates from 2017 to 2019, the youth that came back into our system after we diverted them out, and that's including using programs like Travis's, we have a diversion partnership program, we have a youth court program, we have a mediation program, we have a lot of different programs where we divert our youth out of the system. For those youth, the return rate, there were only about 6% of them that ever came back into the system. For our Rafa, from what I understand, the last information I got about Rafa, we had 85 youth that had totally completed all of the youth, all of the program, and had done their program, their case plan, and only 2 of them returned. And so when you think about those numbers, our youth that go into Department of Children's Services custody, their recidivism rate is around 50 to 60%. And so they're going out, they're going in, they're not getting treatment, rehabilitation, and they're coming right back, going right back into the neighborhoods, not have learned anything from their experience, and they're getting rearrested and going back into the system. And so for me, this works. Diversion works. Restorative justice absolutely works. And, you know, for restorative justice, not only does it work for the child who committed the harm, but it also works better for the person who was harmed. You know, before I became a magistrate and a judge, I was a public defender. And if I'm in a case and I'm doing my job and zealously representing my client, when a person who's harmed gets on the stand to say, it really made me feel bad, or I really was unhappy, or this, I would object and say, objection, Your Honor, that's not part of the crime. And so that person walks away frustrated with the system, the criminal system that we know, because they didn't get an opportunity to really be heard about what they were feeling, what they needed, and what they missed. And so in a regular criminal system, it doesn't work for the victims. It doesn't work for those who caused the offenses. In a restorative circle, in a restorative program, it actually gives voice to everybody. Everybody has an opportunity to have that voice. And so not only do I like to lean on the stats, in which we do, and we have to, because that's what people want to hear, and they want to see, well, how many youth came back. And I challenge myself and I challenge my staff that it's not just about the number of youth that return into our system. I want to know how many people are successfully graduating from high school and moving on to college, successfully getting jobs and getting a family and changing the trajectory of their life. And that's when we think about recidivism, that's what I want to look at. But, for the community reason, we look at how many people come back into the system. It is extremely low how many people come back that have gone through a diversion program. And that's why we continue to focus on those diversions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Judge Calloway. And Travis, I mean, feel free in answering this next question to add whatever data you wanted to add if Judge Calloway didn't add it. The question I wanted to ask you was about accountability. Accountability is one of the pillars of restorative justice process, right? And oftentimes when we hear the word accountability, at least from systems folks, it's in the language of holding someone accountable, right? There is this power over kind of thing to it. It's almost made synonymous with punishment. You know what I mean? And so when the word accountability is said as being, one of the core values of restorative justice, it could almost be confusing sometimes. And some clarification might be needed here, might be in order, for when we say accountability and restorative justice, what do we mean? Do we mean something that a young person can be held to? Or what do we mean when we talk about accountability and restorative justice?
Yeah. This term is both beautiful and dangerous. The way we have it, the word accountability needs healing. It needs some restoration. And the way that we talk about it, at least at Rafa Institute, is that we start with the idea of harm. Start there. That harm is this transient dynamic that moves through communities, passing from one person to another. The recipient of harm today becomes the distributor of harm tomorrow, and it keeps traveling and moving, and it hits the same person 2 or 3 times, and it keeps moving. It moves through us in the form of fibromyalgia and anxiety and depression and disease and high blood pressure and hypertension, and it transmits into our job, into our workplace, and how we can or can't navigate it. It causes us to lose sleep at night. Harm is this insidious dynamic that passes and travels through communities. And when you remove resources from communities, there's an indirect relationship. As resources go down, harm goes up, right? And so we start there, and then we embrace this idea that as this harm, these actions, these behaviors are passing among people in a community, that at some point this harm must be accounted for. We have to name it. We have to find it, and we have to identify, we have to locate it, and we have to address it, and we have to respond to it. It needs that. Else it will continue to move and permeate. It is a self-propelling thing. It will mold itself by itself if it is not accounted for. And we love the term account, really in its strictest sense. I mean, think about an accountant, right? The person who counts the money. If you have a business or you have a department or an agency that you run, you're responsible for. If your accountant came to you and said, hey, for this year, for our audit, we're going to round everything, we're going to round every transaction to the nearest $10,000. Every receipt, every expense, we're going to round it to the nearest $10,000. Well, you would kindly look at your accountant and you would kindly say to him or her, you need to find another job, because no, we are not rounding our books to the nearest $10,000. That's crazy. No, I want it rounded to the nearest penny. In fact, I want every penny to be counted. We need to know what came in. We need to know where it went out. But that is what we do with harm in the traditional criminal legal process. We round it to the nearest law. We round harm to the nearest broken law. So if there's a car theft or if there's a homicide, we round what the person who experienced that harm and the person who caused that harm, we round it off to the nearest law. We do not probe, our system doesn't probe all the dimes and the nickels and the pennies of the harm. It doesn't probe the sleeplessness. There's no state statute that incorporates that into a penalty. There's no state statute that incorporates the fact that now my intimate partner relationships are struggling because I have PTSD from what I went through with that armed robbery. I don't like going to grocery stores at all anymore because that's where I got mugged. I don't like being in open spaces anymore. I can't sleep at night. I sleep all the time now. I find myself more agitated. I can't eat. I'm eating all the time now. I'm drinking now. I didn't smoke before, but I do now. All of the harm and its impact, our current system doesn't account for everything that it meant to go through what I went through. It doesn't name it. It doesn't account for it. And we offer to that person a punishment to another person, and we call that accounting. We call that accountability. And the reality is, Gani, that for a person to be able to accountable, to be able to account for all of the harm that they have caused, it requires a process that allows for that harm to be named, that allows for that person to hear what that harm is, and that allows them the opportunity to learn how to account for it, what it means to account for it, what it means to be responsible for responding to it, to repair, to lean into making it right to the greatest extent possible. This is not an inherent skill that people have. This is something that must be learned, and we need processes that help to teach that. And so that is what we train our restorative justice facilitators in. We train them in helping people, both whether it doesn't matter which side of the gun you're on, if you're the person who's caused the harm or the person who's been harmed, we train them, we teach them skill in accounting for it, naming every penny, what it means to be responsive to each penny. Mrs. Cheatham had questions that were going to help her to heal. And she needed a space and a time to be able to form those questions. She needed to navigate through laying in the floor crying at the top of her lungs. She needed to navigate through that. She needed to navigate through not being able to sleep at night because the man who she had slept with for the last 50 years was no longer there. She needed a process to be able to move through that to get to her questions, to get to what she really needed. And then she needed a space to be able to say, Amir, what possessed you to get in a car and to drive it at a higher? She needed that answer. She needed a space to imagine asking that question and getting an honest answer. And believe it or not, friends, Amir needed a place to answer that question. He needed a space to be able to say, that's what it meant for him to account for a specific penny of her harm. He needed a space to do that. So the notion of holding people accountable as if that's something we can do to a person is a fallacy that needs to be excised from the American thought, from the human thought. We cannot hold anyone accountable. Accounting for harm is a practice, it is a skill that must be developed, it must be taught, it must be nurtured, and we must have processes to do that. We must have processes that facilitate the doing of that. And I believe of all the things that are out there, restorative justice processes are one of the most important vessels for this idea of accounting. And I'll close with this. Marshall and his team, and by the way, they were just brilliant in how they handled filming this unbelievably delicate moment. It's the first time after 2 years that these people were coming together. They had over 3 hours of footage. What you saw in that 3 minutes of that conference, that in and of itself was over 3 hours of footage, probably closer to 4 or 5 hours of footage if you count, the pre-stuff, right? There were a lot of things that were said. One of the things that Mrs. Cheatham said, and I think I could share this with you, she's at the end of the thing, she said to me as she was hugging me, she said, I got my blessing today. I got my blessing today. And I didn't know what she meant. I said, Janice, what do you mean? What do you mean? She said, I just wanted to know that he was human, that he was a good boy. And he is. And he is. I got a chance to ask my questions and he answered my questions. I got my blessing today. Dot, dot, dot.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for Trav. Yeah, got to sit with that for a moment. But we definitely needed some elucidation about accountability, because I think a false promise had been made to us that people can be held accountable. You know what I mean? And so it's important to get that insight from you, that accountability is something that has to come from within, and it doesn't just come naturally. You have to be guided to that. And so we appreciated that. I want to go to Marshall next. Marshall, what do you hope to achieve with this film? How do you hope it will continue to shape, public perception, or shape the dominant narrative about violence and harm and the ways they can be addressed and reduced?
The first, I want to achieve a couple things. I want to remind people that everyone in this system is a human being. The defendants, the lawyers, the deputies, the judges, everyone is a human being. That's really, really important, because if you can't accept that, then you're doing no good. This is why we have, I think the statistic is 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population. So we're just wasting human lives. But if you can accept that they're human, then you say, okay, what do I do? What do I do? Second thing I really want to achieve is recognition that this is a complicated situation. You know, I was giving the example before, people would just say, lock them up, or people just say, let them go. And not good isn't going to come out of that. There is nothing. And so what I wanted people to recognize next is, yes, it's complicated. It's really complicated. Another is that I think a lot of us, me having been trained as a lawyer, go straight to policy. And I think you can't rush by the humanity. You can't rush by the fact that you're dealing with human beings, and open up your mind and then get to policy. Plug into the humanity of the people. That's really important. I think another thing, Gani, that, you know, and Travis and Judge Calloway were both talking about that. Right. By the way, can I, as an aside, say, I realize most of the people in the audience are, they're fighting uphill battles. And at times it must be incredibly lonely. And I hope they draw some inspiration from Judge Calloway and Travis. They're just wonderful. And we need to be reminded that we're not alone. They're not alone in fighting these battles. And I just think they've been marvelous. When I talked, here's another thing about alternatives. You know, we spend a lot of time on people who are mentally ill, who clearly are getting nothing from the criminal justice system and don't belong in it. We talk about situations, say domestic violence, which is a really, really big problem. And our incarceration is just going to destroy families. So is there a way to have healing take place there as well? And I just, this concept of healing that Travis was talking about, I really hope that's a major takeaway from the 6-part series. And again, you know, people come out of episode 5 and they say, oh God, it's just such a mess, because we hold nothing back. You know, this is a real candid view of the system. But what Judge Calloway is saying, when you divert 70% of the youths who get arrested and only 6% are rearrested, something good is coming out of that situation. With Travis and Rafa and restorative justice, that's a new concept that people need to heal. The criminal justice system in its current form isn't really trying to heal anyone. So, okay, somebody gets punished. Well, I don't know how soothing that really is for most people. But if I really hope that what comes out of this is the inspiration that I can find a way to forgive if I'm like the Cheathams, without pretending or blocking out the pain. They showed us how you can experience pain but not want to increase the harm. And for Amir, he doesn't have to live with the guilt for the rest of his life. And that's awful. You know, you think when you're 13, I've killed this man who has grandchildren and children and is loved. Oh, how awful. But the restorative justice is actually offering a way forward for him without denying. It's a way of accepting and growing. So I just hope a lot of those concepts and feelings and insights and openings come out of people watching the series.
Thank you, Marshall. I want to go back to you, Judge Calloway, and Travis as well, because some questions are coming in from the audience, and I think these questions are really worth addressing right now. How did this case end up being diverted? You know, who initiated it? You know, who had to sign off on it, and you know what's happened since, etc. Either of you can take that.
Yeah, Travis, I'll start and tell how we started our restorative justice program and how we started getting cases, and then I'll let you finish with this particular case. So when I ran for election to be the judge in Nashville, Tennessee in 2014, I ran on the platform that I would do restorative justice, and I had heard about it from a young lady named Rashida Fatuga. Also, Joe Engel, an older gentleman in our community, knew a lot about restorative justice, and so for both of them, they kind of walked me through the process and what it meant, and so it was definitely something that I wanted to do. And so, shortly after I won an election in 2014, Joe Engel was able to get a meeting with Impact Justice and Sujatha Balika for Sujatha to come to our community and teach us about restorative justice and teach us if we could do it. And so she came. It was about 80 partners that we had in the room, and we all were super interested in it. And we said, let's do it. The biggest thing for us after that, myself, along with the district attorney, the public defender, a captain of the youth services police department division, some all went out to, and a couple more of our staff members went out to California to see restorative justice for real. We went to Oakland, California, got to see some restorative circles, talked to the district attorney, talked to some participants both in Oakland and San Francisco, and we were all sold that we wanted to do it. And so we came back, we decided we were going to do a category of cases. We knew that they had to be felony cases for us. And for us, it had to be a felony with an actual person harmed. And so we decided we were going to do home burglaries. We're going to start with youth who broke into homes. At that time, our biggest challenge was to find an organization that would house it and that would do it. And so we opened up our gates and said, come one, come all, who wants to run our restorative justice program? And for whatever reason, there were some a lot of different reasons why people couldn't or wanted to kind of and tap in it. We struggled to get an agency to really want to run it. At that time, Travis was just starting to do some things in our system and was working with the parents of youth who were in our pretrial housing facility and trying to help navigate them to the system. And so I talked to him one day and I said, I think this should be your program. I think you should do this. And he said, well, I might have to pray on that. And I said, don't worry about that. I've already prayed on it. You're the one. And he didn't believe me. And he did his own prayer. And he came back and said, you're right. The Lord said I could do it. And so we partnered and we decided to start with aggravated burglaries. Like I said, children who broke into homes. And we looked at the data, and literally in a year's period of time, it was less than 10 kids. And so we were like, we might need to expand that. That's not going to be a good sampling of cases. And so we expanded it and we opened it up to, we had a set number of types of cases and an MOU that basically said it couldn't be anybody with a weapon. It couldn't be anybody that got physically hurt. And there was a long list of stuff that we said we couldn't do. And as we found out that as we kept going, we wanted to do more. And it wasn't just me, the court wanted to do more. It wasn't just Rafa, it was our systems partners. And one day the chief of police came and said, can we start doing some cases where the kids have guns? Those are the cases that we need our youth to understand why it's so important that they're not having guns. And so we were all like, well, yeah, let's do it. And so over time, we have opened up the category of cases that we've done. And so for right now, we have an MOU that basically says anything's on the table. And so any cases on the table, we do give a little say or oversight to the district attorney. They can lodge an objection on a case that they think might not be appropriate. But ultimately, a way the MOU says is that me as the judge have the ultimate say on what cases go. And then I'll let Travis talk a little about Amir's case and the Cheathams. But my understanding is they heard about restorative justice and they weren't satisfied with the way that the system was handling the case. And they asked that this be one of the cases that we do for restorative justice. So I'll turn it over to you, Travis, now.
Trav, before you go, because I want you to follow up on that piece behind Judge Calloway. But in your response, if you can also answer a question that's burning for a lot of people, which is, in a lot of jurisdictions around the country, restorative justice diversion is only used for low-level cases, burglaries, robberies, felony, aggravated assaults, theft, the whole nine, not homicide cases. Why is that not so in Nashville, Tennessee? How were y'all, how did this kind of case get included as eligible for restorative justice diversion? So if you can massage that into, your follow-up to Judge Calloway's response, that'll be great.
Yeah, I think I'll start there. First, let me say restorative justice practices as an ethic, as an ethos, as a kind of way of life is not new. It has been around for centuries. In First People groups and indigenous people groups around the world have been using the peace pipe, the circle, the talking stick to resolve inter-community conflict, intra-community conflict for hundreds, probably thousands of years. So it is not new. The work right now is trying to contemporize it in our criminal legal context. How do we intersect it in a meaningful way? The other thing I think I want to say right now is, listen, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. I know some of y'all are sitting here listening to Judge Calloway and talking about our police chief came to us and said, can we start doing da-da-da, so on. Y'all are probably sitting there like, the hell planet do they live on in Nashville that they got police chiefs coming talking about diverting cases to restorative justice and doing homicide? What in the world? That is not our reality. Listen, I get it. I'm sorry. Yes, as a CBO, we are fortunate to have the people that we have in office in this city, in this county. We're just fortunate. I know it's not like that everywhere. And seriously, I know there are some of you out there who have been trying and won, and you hit nothing but brick walls. Listen, stay encouraged. Stay encouraged. All I can say, keep fighting the good fight. And if you're a decision maker, if you're a policy maker, you're a DA, police chief, legislator, whatever, listen to me. Listen to me. Follow. So this case came. Let me jump in with this as well. Restorative justice processes actually work best the more intense the harm. The more intense the harm, the better a restorative process is as an option for responding. And the reason why is because the criminal legal system is in a fixed spot. It does not move. It doesn't move. It does not move towards the intensity of the harm. It does not move closer to it in terms of responding to it. It's going to give the same response to a home burglary as it is going to give to a homicide. It's going to prosecute it, it's going to find it guilty or not guilty, and you're going to get the prescribed sentence, whatever it is, probation or prison. It's not moving. It's not moving towards you personally, if you're the person who's been harmed, or if you're the person who has caused the harm and wants to account for it. It's not going to move towards you, right? And so the more intense the harm, the further away the human beings get from meaningful responses when they're going through the system. That is to say, they move through and leave the system process with a greater deficit of justice, a greater deficit of harm, a greater deficit of their needs being met. You think about, I had a family, I'm thinking about my brother was murdered. That's a lot of harm that would happen to me. And the system only has so much to offer me. And don't let it be some like questionable circumstances when the DA is coming to you, talk about, well, we're gonna strike a deal with him. We're gonna give him like we're gonna ask for like a 10-year sentence with 5 of it probated. Nah, I'm gonna be upset. I'm gonna feel I'm gonna feel like you had a lot of ground to make up with me with respect to justice, and we didn't get there. You did not get there. So restorative justice processes, on the other hand, move with the people. What's your harm? Let's respond to it. What's your harm? Let's respond to it. What are the pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters? Let's respond to it. Let's respond to that. Let's respond to that. Let's respond to that. What does it look like to respond to that? How do we answer that? How to respond to that? So you can do that in a restorative justice process. It's customizable. It can move with you. On this particular case, this was the situation. You know, I was watching the news, heard about this case, watching the news, and I'm listening to this family. I'm listening to their press conferences, and I'm thinking, man, they sound like they do not want to go through the criminal legal system at all. That sound like this is not what they want at all. So I reached out to my colleague Valerie Craig at Tennessee Voices for Victims. I said, "Have you seen this case?" And she said no. So I sent her the clip. She looked at the news press conference. I said, "You think this would be a good RJ case? Think they might be interested?" And she said, "Oh yeah." And so we reached out to our DA and we said, "Hey, got this case here. I think this family might be interested in doing an RJ process." And he talked to the ADA at juvenile court. The ADA juvenile court said, "Hey, if the family wants to do it, we won't object to it." And so that's how it happened. So then we reached out to Dia, to the daughter, and shared with her that we wanted to talk to her and her family if they were open about, and she's an educator, so she was familiar with the idea of restorative justice in the school setting. And so she was open to it. She talked to her 2 brothers and her mother. The one brother and the mom were like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But the more they went through the legal process, the more frustrated they became. And so they voluntarily decided that they wanted to pursue this process. They didn't know what it meant. They didn't know what it meant at all. And that gives you a little frame, for those who are asking, that gives you a little framework of pretty much how any case would happen, right? As Sheila said, we have a MOU that is signed by me, Judge Calloway, District Attorney Funk, and the public defender and the police chief, Martisa Johnson and John Drake. We all sit down in a room once a year, and we'll talk for 2 hours. Sheila's laughing. These are great conversations. We'll talk about how the restorative justice process has been going, what needs to change, and generally, how do we expand it? What does that look like? What new cases are going to take? What exclusions do we need to work out? This is very important. We want to build the rules into the MOU. We don't want people just picking and choosing cases all the time, right? So if it meets this criteria, parties will be made aware that their case is eligible for a restorative justice process if they want to do it. That's another piece. It is optional. It is an opportunity for people who have caused harm or who have been harmed to participate if they want to. And so that's how it works. the court will send us over the eligible cases. We staff those cases, we review the referrals and make sure they actually do fit the MOU and that it's actually appropriate for restorative justice process. Believe it or not every case is appropriate for a restorative justice process. We then will accept the referral or send it back. We accept a referral, we reach out to the harmed party, we let them know that their case has been diverted to our organization and that they have the option to pursue this process. If they want to do that, we then enroll them. We then reach out to the person who's caused the harm and let them know that their case has been referred to a restorative justice process and they have the option to participate in this process. So this is not a court mandate. The court's not making anyone do it. It's an option. If both parties want to participate, we then communicate that back to the court that both parties have enrolled, and then we move forward. The court doesn't touch it anymore. If either one of the parties do not want to participate in the restorative justice process at any point, we refer the case back to the court and it goes through the traditional legal process. Once in, we're working with the person harmed, we're working with the responsible party. It normally takes weeks/months to do that work. Where the parties desire to come together in a conference, they can do that. We come together in a conference. We don't create the restoration plan. The parties actually create the restoration plan. In this case, the Cheathams met for about 3 hours. The Cheathams and the Haydens met for about 3 hours. They said they wanted Amir to be a good man to replace the good man that he took. That was pretty much all that happened in that meeting. We then came back for another 2 hours and we unpacked what did that mean for him to be a good man? What were the concrete things you wanted to see happen in Amir's life that would define him becoming a good man? And they came up with a list of things, a list of projects, a list of concrete things that they wanted to, and Amir and his mom were there and they agreed together to what those things would be. Some of them related to school projects, some of them had to do with things around in his home. And Amir completed all of those things. We reported that back to the court. The court then dismissed retired the homicide case, the vehicular homicide case. And yes, he does not have that case on his record. The Cheatham family was satisfied with the outcomes of the case, and that's it.
Wow. Thanks, Trav. And as the hourglass and our time together runs low, I want to try to get some very important questions coming in from the audience. Hopefully we can really get to all of these. Marshall, it would follow after everything Travis just explained and Judge Calloway explained about how a case like this can get referred for diversion or eligible for diversion. How on earth were you able to film a case like this?
To gain access to do this entire project, I had to get people to trust me. The DA eventually took several meetings. The public defender took several meetings, the judges. And I convinced them that I just was going to be fair. I wasn't going to exploit, and I wasn't going to be a shill for anybody. I just wanted to be fair. And then on top of that, Gani, I had to convince them that what was at stake was more than just their case, that the Cheathams saw that this was an opportunity to show people how you could respond differently after a harm. And they were, they had been terribly wounded, and they needed to understand that I wasn't out to exploit their pain. I was out to make them instructors, something they could actually, and not instructors is not right, something they could actually show and inspire people to move forward. And they trusted me for that. I met with Amir, and these were meetings without cameras, and it was the same thing. We just want to teach the world that there are alternatives in this situation. And they trusted me. They really did. And then my guys were just great at slipping into the woodwork. You know, they did not want to be part of this process. Let me just add one thing very quickly. Travis was adamant that the priority was the Cheathams and Amir. If they were unhappy, if they were uncomfortable, I was gone. I was gone. Travis, I mean, he saw the bigger opportunity to show the world how restorative justice could work. But no, nothing was going to interfere with this process, no matter what.
Thank you, Marshall. And while we're here on this piece about film, people want to know how they can see your other work.
Well,
As it relates. Yeah, where can they find your series?
oh, great. Thank you. It's on Max, which used to be HBO, and then there are mergers in the Hollywood business. And so now it is Max Justice USA. It's a 6-part series.
Okay. Thank you, Marshall. So we have a few more minutes and we need to get in and out with these last questions, right? But they're burning questions for folks right now. Trav, as well as you, Judge Calloway, we know that in restorative justice centers relationships. So, you're building, the facilitators build a relationship with the young people, with the person harmed. It's not as if with the court process, once the case is done, everybody's dispensed with and pretty much dropped off a cliff. You know what I mean? You're keeping up with what's going on with everybody, we imagine, because this is restorative justice. And so folks want to know, like, what Amir is doing now. How are the Cheathams, for instance? How is Amir's mom doing? Right? How, how are things coming along with Amir?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer some of these questions in the chat. Yeah, Amir is doing great. He's set to graduate high school next year. He's got a girlfriend. He's doing well. He's enrolling this fall in a culinary arts program here called Cafe Momentum that Judge Calloway brought. He's early on, you're 13 years old and you've killed something. And then just sit with that for a second. You just finished 8th grade and you're going to 9th grade. So he goes to school and yeah, all the kids are looking at him like, oh, damn. You're the kid who wrecked into that man on Noblesville Road, right? He's dealing with that, right? Going into 9th grade, that's what he was struggling with day in and day out. So just him going to school was a challenge. Him going to class, him staying engaged in that space was very, very difficult for him psychologically, emotionally. We would visit him at school at least once a week, helping him just, navigate. He had some stumbles, along the way in the aftermath of this, still growing up. And think now, he turned 17 this year, and now he's a 17-year-old thinking about how he killed a man at 13. There's a whole new set of ideas and thoughts that he's having to figure out how to navigate just as a 17-year-old who still doesn't have a driver's license yet. He's still young. His brain is still forming. He doesn't have all the equipment that he needs to be able to navigate that. And so we continue to support him. We continue to support him. He is engaging with the campaign for the fair sentencing of youth, hoping to see him at the conference coming up this fall. He continues to do well overall, though. He continues to do well. His mother is doing fine. This family, his mother was familiar with this kind of a space. Her father had a heart attack and died in the aftermath of being crashed into by a kid who was killed in that collision. And he was so broken up by that he had a heart attack like 2 months later and died. And so this wasn't such strange territory for her emotionally, to have her son involved in a homicide associated, or a death associated, a loss of life associated with a car crash. You know, she continues to work. She moved from that neighborhood that they were in. She continues to work, to try to give Amir the best possible chance. The Cheathams are doing well. Mrs. Cheatham has since passed away. She passed away last year. She had just had a heart transplant when all of this happened. And you know, her heart was broken. Her heart was broken in many ways. And she passed away from complications with that. Yet they would have had the opportunity to witness their first great grandchild, who was born 6 days ago. Dia's daughter just had a child 6 days ago. So that family is continuing to, to do well. You can't. I think someone asked the question in the chat. Hey, you can't make everything like it was. So the goal of restorative process is, to the greatest extent possible, to create a repair, to identify what repair looks like, and to pursue that. Go ahead, Gani.
Oh, wow. Could listen to this for a long time. It's so educational and enlightening, and it's so urgent, but also so hopeful. We were just, we didn't get to all of the questions that folks had, questions about training. Folks, they want to learn this. They want to know how to do this work in their cities. We want to know how much this costs, for instance, you know what I'm saying, compared to how much it costs to keep a child in a jail cell or a prison cell, which we know is significantly less. Right. But we want to thank you all for what you each shared today. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your bravery and your commitment to what you believe is right. Right. And we want to ask everyone in the meantime to do a closing poll. Right. We'll put the poll up. In the meantime, Judge Calloway, Travis Claybrooks, Marshall Goldberg, bless your hearts, Godspeed on your journey and your quest to bring about change and shape the dominant narrative. And we're so happy to be in this fight with you all, and look forward to holding more spaces with you and to continue to learn, from you, and just mine the jewels that you've gotten from your experience with this work. Thank you for just lifting our spirits here today. I'm hoping everybody can walk away, with a sense of hope of what's possible.
And
Let's
Kivers,
look at this.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to say that, we are Common Justice has been doing this work in the adult criminal legal system for almost, 20
They're
years
the
now.
first. Yeah.
Yeah. We are expanding into the adult legal system here in Davidson County. So yes, this works in adult court. By the way, who said that 18 was when you became an adult? Right?
Exactly.
Who said that was the magic number? Does that make it right? So a 19 or 20 or 25 or a 26-year-old. I mean, even the car rental place won't rent to you if you ain't 25. Your insurance is crazy high when you're 20. So they know brain science. They've known brain science for years.
That's right.
Right. So this can work in adult court cases as well, and especially when people who've experienced trauma as children, their psycho-emotional development gets halted. And so even though you're biologically 25 or 30 or 35 years old, psychologically and emotionally, you still might be 8 that first time that you got abused or you witnessed abuse in your house or you experienced an adverse childhood experience.
Thank you. Thank you. Much gratitude, much gratitude for everyone tuning in today from the film that we saw, the conversation we had, and the work that our panelists and partners are doing with restorative justice diversion around the country. Hope grows inside of us that you can step away from your screens, right? Believing strongly that another way is possible, right? We're talking about lifting up a model that's implemented in the South, to be quite frank, right? This didn't happen like in Massachusetts or, so you know what I mean? This happened in Tennessee, an infamous site of struggle during the civil rights era, and a state that still has the death penalty. You dig what I'm saying? And so this is especially important for us to be inspired by and hopeful about as we engage our communities and cities, right? And we want to remind you all that this is part of a this is part one of a two-part conversation. Part two will focus on restorative justice diversion in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia historically has been a tough on crime city that has sentenced more adolescents to death by incarceration than any other city in the country and world. And so that makes restorative justice diversion in this city especially significant for the rest of the country, right? The date of part two has yet to be determined. We'll let you know as soon as it's set, but we hope you'll return for that conversation to see what lessons are being learned by practitioners and systems partners in this city that might be of value to the work you're doing in your city and state. But this restorative justice, that's what we want to walk away knowing, that restorative justice has the capacity to address serious harms. And we hope you can take this as a call to action to think boldly, right? Because perhaps the most costly casualty of the carceral project is the arrest and imprisonment of our imaginations, right? It has become hard for many of us to even imagine another way of dealing with harm, especially violent harm. So hopefully the film we saw and the conversation that we just had can help us to see that another way is possible, another path forward exists. Our salvation is in the liberation of our imagination, is how I like to rhyme it, right? But it's good news for us. So many disheartening things are afoot in the world, and it could all be so demoralizing, right? All the unbearable excesses that we've laid on ourselves and the world it just can make us really pessimistic, but another way exists. And so for all the practitioners and stakeholders here today, we bring good news, right? We bring glad tidings of another way. And with that, I'd like to say peace and hope to see you in September for part two.